Game over. Here's Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So serious.
Roll out.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 121 for June 14th, 2015, and I'm Cocosaurus JD Duran.
And that's Chaos Theory.
That's Chaos Theory.
And I'm also Brendan Cassidy.
Thanks for joining us this week, everybody. We have a fun show in store as we're going to be talking Jurassic World and a whole bunch of other things. Before we get into any of that, though, Brendan, how was your week, man?
It was a week. Well, first off, I got to say my apologies for not being able to make a solid time workout for last weekend.
Okay.
As you mentioned, I was in a wedding in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, seeing two of my good friends get married from college. I knew both bride and groom very well, and it was a great ceremony. They were the happiest bride and groom I think I've ever seen.
Nice.
Like literally, at the end of the ceremony, she literally like squeaked out, "We did it!" I love. It was so adorable and.
Nice.
Yeah, so there was a great moment there and absolutely loved every second of that. So needless to say, this weekend I took it a little bit calm. I didn't really do anything.
Sure.
Basically just spent my whole time kind of finally sitting down, or not sitting down, but getting ready to organize and make my apartment look, homey, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So
that's okay. We certainly made last week work, even with you being gone. I thought we had a really great show. So discussing Aloha and Ratatouille. I know that was a discussion you missed out on. Would have loved to have you there. I know you love that film.
Oh, yeah, and I just want to quickly say that I'm more with you when it comes to Aloha, surprisingly. I didn't think it was all that bad. I thought it was a really nice... I like the aspect of past, present, and future that the character of Bradley Cooper was going through, which I thought was the overlying theme more than anything else. But yeah, the script is a mess. I mean, the movie makes no sense. And Michael Dennison...
though. It's fine.
But Michael Dennison, who you had on the show, is absolutely right. The movie's confusing. I was confused as well. I had no idea what was going on. But I did enjoy most of it. I took the themes like you did. But yeah, Ratatouille is one of my top 3 favorite Pixar films. That's probably one of the very best films ever made about artistic inspiration, if you ask me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But how about you? You were just in Michigan, right?
Yep, I was just in Michigan back home, so I did the opposite of you last week. I was the one traveling this weekend, but we still found a time to record this weekend. And
make me look bad. There you go.
Exactly. No, I'm just kidding. It was perfectly fine last week, but the mini vacation, I guess you want to call it, it started off kind of crazy. So when we first got there, and we went to my parents' house first, and we left on Friday, like early evening-ish. So by the time we got there, it was late. It was like almost 11 o'clock or something like that. And so essentially we were just going to say hi to my dad, who was home, and then we were pretty much just going to go to bed. Well, that didn't happen because there was an accident with the door somehow getting open, and Dakota somehow found his way outside and then all over the neighborhood, which is funny in a lot of different ways I won't go into here, but I had a dog growing up that did that several different times before he finally figured out he can't run away from home. So now living in Kentucky, I go all the way back home for Dakota to do the same thing 20 some odd years later. So here I am at 11:30 at night chasing Dakota all over the neighborhood. And he wouldn't listen. He was just kind of doing his own thing. And at first, it just started off as a little anger and frustration of having to do this at 11:30 at night. But after about an hour and a half of this going on, it went from frustration and anger to a little anxiety and fear out of something happening to Dakota. And so we were trying to get on the phone with some people to try to help us find him, and that was also frustrating. And after about 2 hours, we just had to go back to my dad's house because I had no idea where he was. Couldn't find him, not a single bark. I couldn't hear the jingle of his collar or anything. And we were just sitting at my dad's house, and my wife, Brandy, we were trying to get her phone charged because we have her number on his collar in case someone found him. And while Brandy was coming back to the car, we were trying to figure out what our next steps were. Well, as we were discussing that, just a little bit in the distance, out of the corner of our eye, we saw him running back toward the house. So we drove the car to where he was, we opened the door, and as soon as I opened the door, he jumped up in my lap in the car. It was a really gorgeous moment. And it was really cool. It was just like the climax of any cliche dog lost film you probably have ever watched in your life. But
only when the dog doesn't die.
When the dog doesn't die. And it was great. And it was really cool because he literally was off in his own little world, and he did find his way home, like all by himself. And it was kind of neat. And of course, then there's like the whole father-son welcome him back into my arms kind of thing, which was always nice.
Right.
So, and outside of him getting a little skunked, he did get a little skunked, but
yeah,
we fixed that problem. He's fine now. He's clean. Everything's happy, and we're home finally. So,
well, that's good. That's good. I mean, well, the thing is, like you said, he found his way home, but that's technically not his home, though. I mean, he's not used to being.
Yeah,
there.
true.
So that's. He's a smart cookie. I'll tell you that.
He
right
is.
Now.
You're right. That's even more impressive that he just found my parents' house, which he's only been to one other time before. So
right. Yeah. I just keep imagining that story with all this like sappy music playing in the background.
No, right? Exactly. That's exactly what it was.
So Hollywood, but you gotta love it. Well, I'm glad he made it back. And sounds like he had a good trip as well.
It was great. Outside of that, the next day we were at my brother's house. We had a fun cookout. The whole family thing. It was pretty blissful. I quite enjoyed it. So
good.
All right. Well, let's bring on this week's guest. I'm super excited for this because our guest this week has not been on the show, Brendan, since episode 2. Dose, as in 119 episodes ago.
As in between 1 and 3.
Yes, so been a long time, but good friend Matt Lee back on the show. Matt, thanks for being here, man.
Hey, it's great to be back. This is definitely different. This is amusing.
Yeah.
It's fun.
It is fun. So I know we've been, conversing a lot, especially on Saturdays and stuff. And we were talking about Terminator and Jurassic Park and all that a few months ago. And we decided, hey, it's been a long time. You should come back for Jurassic World. And here we are. So I'm glad that you're here, man.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yay!
It's going to be a fun show. As I alluded to earlier, we are going to be discussing Jurassic World, which is taking the box office by storm. Only second to Avengers for domestic box office in a weekend.
Yeah, I don't even think Universal Studios predicted that.
No, they didn't. In fact, I don't know how true this is, but I read something about how a lot of the predictions were about half as what it's doing.
It was around 120. Yeah, that's
crazy.
It's already got like over 200.
Yeah. So we're going to be discussing that, and going off of that, for our top 3 this week, we're going to be going over our top 3 moments from the Jurassic Park franchise. Hopefully it's not all stuck on the first film, but we'll see how that goes.
We'll see how we manipulate our criteria. We may have to.
Absolutely. And of course, we're going to be continuing and actually finishing out our Pixar movie series this week with Finding Nemo as we lead into Inside Out next week. So a full show. Should be a lot of fun. Let's get into it.
And here we go.
You're listening to the InSession Film Podcast. This is episode 121. So the best moment of Jurassic World was definitely the guy trying to save his margaritas as he was running away from danger. And as it turns out, that guy was Jimmy Buffett in Margaritaville.
There's a woman to blame, and I know it's nobody's fault.
Brendan, it's okay. It's okay. You can stop now.
Just went and made a new dinosaur?
Yeah, it's kind of what we do here. The exhibit opens to the public in 3 weeks. Mr. Mizrani wanted me to consult with you.
You want to consult here or in my bungalow?
It's not funny.
A little funny.
We'd like you to evaluate the paddock for vulnerabilities.
Why me?
I guess Mr. Mizrani thinks since you're able to control the raptors.
See, it's all about control with you. I don't control the raptors. It's a relationship. It's based on mutual respect. That's why you and I never had a second date.
Excuse me, I never wanted a second date.
Who prints out an itinerary for a night out?
I'm an organized person.
What kind of a diet doesn't allow tequila?
All of them, actually. And what kind of a man shows up to a date in board shorts?
It's Central America. It's hot.
Okay. Can we just focus on the asset, please?
The asset?
All right, Jurassic World is directed by Colin Trevorrow and stars Chris Pratt, Bryce Dallas Howard, Vincent D'Onofrio, Ty Simpkins, Nick Robinson, my boy Jake Johnson, and a whole slew of other people that I'm sure we'll get into. Mr. Matt Lee, our awesome guest this week, we'll toss it to you first, man. What did you think about Jurassic World?
Overall, I mean, I had a really fun time with it. I thought it was a great film, great summer film, and it sounds like that's the real thing that it's people are seeing it as a really fun summer film. Mm-hmm. But overall, I mean, it was very enjoyable, a lot of action, and I would put it up there right next to the first one for me.
Okay, what about you, Brendan?
So I have a lot written down that I want to say here.
Me too.
As always. But anyway, it's been 14 years since the last Jurassic Park film came into theaters, not including the 3D re-release of the first one, which happened, like 2 years ago, I think it was.
Like 2012, 13, something like 2013 maybe.
Yeah. But regardless, though, for most of us, it has been 22 years since the release of a good Jurassic Park film, which I would fall into that camp, that I was not blown away by the second and third installment, to say the least.
Same here, yeah.
And the first Jurassic Park, despite maybe some minor flaws with it, it is one of my all-time favorite movies. Like, it'd probably be within my top 25 favorite movies for nostalgic purposes. I remember when I first saw it, I was 4 years old. I was at a drive-in movie theater.
4 years old. That's scarring at that age.
I think my parents may have left early after the great stuff for the first half, and then they said, "Okay, this is too violent for you." It was played. It was played as a double feature with The Little Rascals, and I think that's what I was there to see. But even at 4 years old, the they're moving in herds scene still stuck with me. Even at 4 years old, I recognize that as cinematic bliss. But it's been that long since that first came out. We needed a good Jurassic Park movie to follow after those second and third films. Sure. Personally, I think we finally got the good sequel. Now, is it a great movie? My inner child wants to say yes, but my brain confirms. My brain kind of confirms that I did have some problems with the film. I mean, most of it are kind of script based, which we'll get into. But that's kind of expected that the film has been in production hell for so long. You're going to get so many chefs in and out of that kitchen. But I'm so happy to report that we finally have a good Jurassic Park sequel that makes me excited to see more movies potentially come out of this. And with this huge box office opening that they didn't expect it to have, I mean, more movies are probably inevitable at this point. And I'm finally excited to see where it goes. I did feel like a kid again watching this. It's so much fun. Kind of felt like almost like a cartoon in many ways, and I mean that as a compliment. It also kind of reminded me a lot of J.J. Abrams' film Super 8, which came out a few years ago, and having the Amblin Entertainment logo over top of that was so important to the fact that this is definitely in the tradition of classic summer blockbuster filmmaking. Sure. It has heart, it has laughs. Not all the heart and laughs work, but there was enough characters here that I really cared about. There was enough laughs here to keep me engaged, and I had so much fun from beginning to end. I was grinning the whole time, and I'm finally excited to see where this goes.
Well, given the internet response to this, I wasn't exactly sure how you guys were going to lean. Now, I did go see this with Matt, so I had a pretty good idea where he stood with it. Mm-hmm. I was curious to see where you were going to stand with this, Brendan, and this should be an interesting conversation because I'm actually kind of in the same boat with you guys. And like you were talking about, Brendan, if you're looking at this objectively, is it a bad film? I think you can argue that it's not super great.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at it from just a fun summer popcorn kind of angle, I quite enjoyed myself too. I especially think if you just don't think about it logically, it's just a blast and it's a lot of fun. And the director, Colin Trevorrow, and I talked about this a couple weeks on the show, Brendan, he predicated a lot of this on nostalgia. And he said that he wanted adults to feel like kids again because like you, Brendan, I saw this when I was young. I probably saw it when I was too young too the first time. I was probably 5 or 6 years old. It scared the crap out of me as it should have at that age. And based off of the box office numbers, as we were talking about, and the comments that I saw on Facebook, I think he seemed to succeed on that predication of nostalgia. In the opening first 5 minutes or 10 minutes of this film, once we get to the park, Trevorrow wastes no time in that because we see the Jurassic World front entrance, which very much resembles Jurassic Park. The score from Michael Giacchino starts to ramp up. The kids open those balcony doors. That amazing John Williams theme kicks in, and I was hooked. I was utterly hooked. And Trevorrow doesn't slow down. He continues to prey on your nostalgia. There's a lot of great scenes like in the control room with Jake Johnson, which is hilarious. A little bit on the nose in terms of its references to the first Jurassic Park, but I found it brilliant.
I love that. I love that. And we can go into the product placement later, but they're all on the nose. I love that.
I know. I loved it too. I thought it was really great. And of course, even the kids come across some old locations from the first movie. There's characters from the first Jurassic Park and not just human either. And I'm sure we'll talk about that later in this. So does the nostalgia work? Absolutely, I think it does. Now, here's where the conversation can turn, and I'll be curious to hear you guys' thoughts on this. For the film itself, does the nostalgia work? I would almost argue not. I think it relies too heavily on having to see and know Jurassic Park in contrast to something like, let's say, WALL-E, Brendan, as we discussed a few weeks ago on the show, which has references to 2001 and other sci-fi films. I don't think you necessarily have to see those films to enjoy WALL-E. I don't think you have to. Now, it adds another dynamic for sure. But for Jurassic World, on its own, I don't know if it works entirely outside of having seen and loving Jurassic Park. I think Trevorrow, from just an artistic standpoint, relies a little bit too much on the nostalgia. But a lot of people, like Brendan was saying, loves it. It's a huge classic for a reason. So a lot of people seem to dig it. The box office numbers seem to prove that. So for me, it's not a huge criticism, but I think it is a criticism of the film.
And I personally, I can understand that point. It's just the problem with that. That's like saying Toy Story 3 doesn't work on its own because you didn't see the first other two films. Because
which can be true. That can be true.
But I don't think you're emotionally impacted by a film like that if you haven't seen the other films. I think, and I think the same case could be said for a movie like Jurassic World because it is part of this series, and in many ways it really is supposed to be that direct sequel to the first film. It doesn't necessarily ignore the fact that the second and third installments took place. It just doesn't reference them. But I think the fact that it is within a franchise, a continuing franchise, I think judging it as a standalone film, I'm not saying it's not fair. I can definitely see your point. It's just for someone like me, that's meaningless for me.
I think the difference is, at least for me, going back to what I was saying, if I was to look at this objectively, I don't think it's a great film. What makes it fun and great is the nostalgia because they prey on that and they use it wonderfully. Don't get me wrong. It's great. And we'll talk more about it. But I think if I wasn't attached to that first one or I had never seen it, a lot of this film I don't think works. But Matt, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on it. Well, personally, there's a lot of nostalgia in it for me also. You know, that was the first movie that I could remember that I saw in theaters. And yes, just like you guys, it terrified me seeing the raptors at the beginning of the first film eat that man right in front of me, and I was like, "That's not how dinosaurs are supposed to act." But yeah, that's what they do. They eat people. But going into this movie, there's a lot of nostalgia to it. But overall, I don't think that it's fair to just place that the movie's doing well just because of the nostalgia. Like I said before, I think it's a great, fun summer film. So I am kind of mixed. I'm kind of in between with you guys. But
yeah.
I think overall, I still think it was a really fun film. Like, even if I didn't see the other ones, I still think I could go in and say, okay, there's dinosaurs in this. There's going to be action. And I think I could still have a lot of fun with it, even without the nostalgia.
See, and there's no way of really knowing that unless we do like a poll to see. I think from just a tactic perspective, I can understand why Trevor wants to do that, because a lot of people have seen the first Jurassic Park and everybody loves it. So why not prey on that nostalgia? I completely understand it. And like I said, it worked for me. It worked for all three of us. I think just on its own, and this is where you and I will disagree, Matt, is as a piece of art, if you separate this from the franchise, from the series on its own, I think there's a lot of problems with it that doesn't work, that would keep people from enjoying it as a piece of art on its own. And I'll talk more about that, because I do have problems with the movie I want to address. But all that being said, though, I'm fine with the tactic. I think it is great. So for the sake of moving on, let's talk about something else. Chris Pratt. Brendan, what do you think?
To be honest, he was... okay, let me just get this out of the way. I love Chris Pratt. I think he's great in almost everything I've seen him in so far, and I thought he was great in this movie. I think it was very surprising that the marketing chose to focus on him, so I felt a little underwhelmed when I realized Bryce Dallas Howard is really the star of this movie.
Yeah. Sure.
And in many ways, like I don't want to bounce over to her yet, because I have more I want to say about her character, but Chris Pratt was... I really enjoyed him in the movie. He had some of the most well-earned laughs that didn't feel forced, I guess I could say.
Yeah.
And one of my favorites is when Bryce Dallas Howard's character Claire says to him, like, can't you follow my nephews? Like, can't you scent them? Like, can't you smell them? He goes, no, I was in the Navy, not the Navajo.
That was great. That was a great line, yes.
I love that. And there are a lot of great lines like that. Some of them don't work, and we'll get to that point later on. But I think for the most part, Chris Pratt has this ability of selling corny, cheesy lines and making them work, and he has that same charisma here. I also thought the most emotionally well fleshed out aspect of this film is his relationship with the Raptors.
Yeah, completely agree.
I agree.
I think, and there are moments in the Raptors later on that I actually didn't quite like. There's a turn that happens that I think felt kind of just nostalgically forced in, where I think the nostalgia didn't quite work, but I don't want to spoil that. But I will say, I think that was the most satisfying relationship in the movie, is between him and the Raptors, and he made it believable.
Yeah.
I think that was an aspect most people were worried about with the film, but I think he made it work for what this movie was trying to do.
All right, what about you, Matt?
Chris Pratt, I believe he was great. I mean, I love him in all his other films. I loved him in Parks and Rec. I loved him in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
He does have a way to bring comedy, like cheesy lines, like Brendan was saying, and make them funny. And that's what I love about Chris Pratt, is he has this attitude about him, like this smart aleck, just...
He's got charisma,
charismatic, just attitude that he can literally say anything, and I think we would laugh at it. In the movie, he reminded me of like a young, charismatic, smart-mouthed Indiana Jones.
Yes,
that's
exactly
and that's what I loved about him. Was
there it is.
Even the kids mention him like, we want to stay with that guy. That's the guy. We want to protect us. Because they're running from dinosaurs. No, we want to be with that guy. We're going to follow him instead. Yeah. So I loved him in the movie. I thought he was great, and he could sell it. I really think he could sell it.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. I think when it comes to the performances, Chris Pratt and Jake Johnson were easily the standouts for me. But Pratt specifically, you guys are right. He's certainly charismatic. He's charming. He's very funny. He does channel his inner Indiana Jones, if you will. And even like one of the kids said in the movie, he's badass. And I completely agree with all that. And I also love Jake Johnson. Man, that guy is the effing man. He stole every scene that he was in. As I alluded to, that first scene with him and the t-shirt, all that sort of stuff was great.
The t-shirt from eBay, I loved it.
It. So good. Or even like that kissing sequence that was supposed to have, and how awkward that was. That was handled so well. I love him. Outside of that, though, and I'll be curious again to hear you guys' thoughts on this, I thought the acting was pretty bad in this, especially Bryce Dallas Howard and Vincent D'Onofrio. I thought were pretty disappointing. And Howard, a lot of it is the writing of her character and the script, because she's about as cliche as they come. She was kind of annoying. I thought it was a pretty feeble performance on its own anyway. And she's playing this character that doesn't respect or even like dinosaurs. And man, I was talking to you about this after the movie, like someone who is that way, how does she get her job running this park if she doesn't like dinosaurs. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me, and I didn't buy that aspect of it. It was such a shallow character arc that I just didn't really buy into. And there's this cathartic moment where she's seeing this dinosaur dying and kind of seeing the errors of her way kind of thing. And it was so unearned. I did not buy into that at all. In fact, the only reason that scene is heartfelt is, again, because of Chris Pratt and him believable in the role, as Brennan was talking about, and because I'm a huge animal guy, and as an animal guy, I kind of just felt for it on its own because of that. And then the last one I'll say, and I'll toss it to you, is D'Onofrio. After seeing Daredevil, again, part of it is the writing, but I was pretty disappointed with D'Onofrio. I don't think he was very good. Again, very cliche, spouting off a bunch of cheesy one-liners and delivering confusing dialogue. Like, his whole plan and the whole military aspect of this film was a bit ridiculous. But again, going back to my opening statements, if you just throw out all the logic and don't think about it, it's still a lot of fun. So, but performances on their own, I didn't really buy into. Brennan, anything to add to that?
Yeah, Vincent D'Onofrio, I will say, his plan is basically straight out of Alien, when you really think about it. It's straight out of the Alien franchise. They want to weaponize what this thing is. And it's unfortunate because, as great of an actor as he is, he couldn't save how generic the character was. Because it basically, I mean, all the characters in this movie are essentially generically written when you really think about it. But the performer has to be able to sell it and make you still believe it. He wasn't able to do that. It was just a caricature of a villain. And probably, in my opinion, my least favorite human antagonist in this entire saga so far, which is very disappointing. Now, with Bryce Dallas Howard, she was my favorite character in the movie by far. I loved her in this movie, and I thought her performance, while it wasn't, I mean, there were no great performances in this movie, but I bought into it. I absolutely bought into it, as generic of a turn as that was. I thought that moment with the dying, I guess it's an Apatosaurus, I think it was, that was very well earned for me. And, I mean, I could believe her in this role as this person, because JD, I guess your argument about, if she's in the role like this, running this dinosaur park as operations manager, like, why would she be here if she has no care or love for these creatures? I feel like that could be said for over half the people in any workforce that they're in these days, is that they're just there. It could just be a job for her before she really realized what she was actually doing. Because, like Chris Pratt says earlier in the movie, she just saw these as numbers on a spreadsheet. She's just a finance person by heart. She's very stiff, very generically stiff, but that's her character. But I felt her turn it worked for me. It really did. I would go as far, I think she's one of the best female characters in this entire franchise. I loved her in this. I absolutely did.
Yeah, see, I'm very much on the opposite of that. I thought she was pretty annoying more than anything. And I think it was a lot of the writing of her character, first of all, was annoying. And then her performance, I thought, was very shallow. It certainly did not work for me, especially that cathartic moment. And you're right in the sense that she does see these as numbers on a spreadsheet. And I can kind of get that from a business sense. But, thinking about it in terms of like, someone who would run a zoo or be in that kind of industry, I'm not going to work in an industry I don't care about. And for her to be on that extreme of, oh, I don't care about these dinosaurs at all, I didn't buy it. I didn't buy it at all. It was a little bit too much. And her performance and trying to sell me and the kind of character she is, and then going for that turn, I felt was really uneven. But Matt, what do you think about it?
You both make really great points, and I'm actually kind of in between both of those. I mean, I can see what you're saying, JD, about, a zookeeper. How do they become the head of a zoo if they hate animals, or if they dislike animals, or they're only seeing numbers or people or customers? And I can see where both you all are coming from on that. But her character was one of those that I actually didn't like in the very beginning of the film, but I grew to like her as time because of the change that she showed. Now, the moment when she spent with the dinosaur and the where she's supposed to see, and she start tearing up and whatnot, that worked for me. I think for some of us, even though we do stuff, we go into stuff that we love, or we see it, we're like, hey, I'm going to love this job. This is something I'm going to do. I think sometimes we can still get lost. We can still get lost. And I think after she saw it in that scene, she realized why she was doing that in the first place. I think it brought her back. So that worked for me.
And that's fair. And like I said, the scene kind of worked for me, but mostly because of my empathy for non-human characters and Chris Pratt. But all that aside, let's talk about the kids in this movie, because I have some thoughts on that as well, especially in contrast to, let's say, the kids in the first Jurassic Park movie. But Brendan, what did you think about the kid characters?
Okay, what did I think about the characters? I think that's the best way I can put it. Because I think the second that they include two brothers on this island, or just two siblings rather, no matter if they're brothers, sisters, whatever they are, it's like, and they sent them on this island by themselves, you know right away that their parents are going through something. And I think they were very generically written, but again, kind of like with a lot of the other characters, I think their performances were enough to sell it from, this is how I judge children in a movie like this these days, is because children these days in movies like this don't hold any suspense, because you know really nothing's probably going to happen to them. But if you still make me care and you feel scared for them, even though you know that that's probably not going to happen, then those actors are doing something right. And for the most part, I felt that. I do think the actor of Nick Robinson, who plays there's Matt and Gray, I think are their names. I think he plays Matt. I thought he was definitely the better of the two, and I thought he had a lot of funny moments. But for the most part, I was sold. I was sold for over half of what they had to do.
I didn't think they were too bad. If you haven't noticed, there's a lot of children characters in all the Jurassic Park franchises. Sure. Out of all of them, I would put them second best. The first film definitely had the better children actors, in my opinion. You know,
I agree.
I feel like they got to spend a lot more time, and me and you talked about that, JD, is they had a lot more screen time together. But overall, I didn't think they did bad. I do agree with Brandon, Zach, Nick Robinson's character. I do think he was the better of the two. But both brothers did share moments together that I did enjoy, and I thought they played really well. But overall, I think there could have been room for improvement.
And once again, I'm going to be on the exact opposite of Brendan here. And you bet a little bit. The thing is, I did have fun with this movie, but, you know, especially in contrast to other films in this franchise, I thought the performance here were pretty weak. I didn't think they added really anything to the film. And maybe it's not fair, because when I look at something like the first Jurassic Park, or even the kid in the third one, I thought was way better than these kids here. And a lot of it has to go
I've been stabbed in the heart.
I know. And a lot of it has to do with, I think, like, you look at like the kitchen sequence in the first film, or even the T-Rex with them in the vehicle in the first film, they sell it on their faces. The terror on their faces was real and visceral, I thought. Even though, like you're saying, Brendan, you know nothing bad is going to happen to them, but they sell it. They absolutely sell it. And in this, it felt pretty cheap and manufactured. I didn't really buy into them being scared. I didn't buy into their danger at all. Especially didn't buy into their parents' divorce angle and all that, which we only saw their parents for like 2 minutes in this film. Like, every emotional thread to these characters, and again, part of it is a script, so it's not their fault, but their performances didn't sell it either. It was so weak. So from an emotional standpoint, I was so out in left field on this one, because all the acting outside of Chris Pratt and Jake Johnson did not work for me. The animal characters in this film is a completely different story, and we can get into that, but I was pretty put off by the kid performances in this.
I liked the kids enough that I wasn't dramatically invested in it. I'm not going for something like that in a movie like this, but I did enjoy watching them on screen. I think where I really enjoyed it most was when they got to start sharing screen time with Bryce Dallas Howard and Chris Pratt. That's when the four of them were together. It was
better in the third act for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe that's where I'm kind of looking at it mostly. But I enjoyed it enough. I really did.
Okay, well, let's talk about the final sequences of the film before we get to final thoughts. Of course, there's a little bit of a predictable twist with the Indominus Rex dinosaur and the raptors, as Brendan was kind of talking about. But, Matt, I'll toss it to you first. What did you think about that third act? The third act?
I'm going to have to say I did enjoy it. The Indominus Rex, I thought, was a really interesting twist to the movie. I kind of cheated, so I kind of looked up some stuff beforehand before going to the movie, and I kind of knew what to expect. But I thought overall the third act was well put together. There was a lot of redeeming facts that actually happened there. I don't know if I can spoil anything, but
I think we can. I mean, because everyone's pretty much seen this movie.
Okay, yeah. Let's just say you're going to be really happy when you when you see the T-Rex come out, and it really makes up for the third Jurassic Park, which a lot of people were angry at because the T-Rex pretty much gets eaten in 5 minutes, by the Spinosaurus, and I hated that movie. I got to say that, but there's a lot of really redeeming really a lot of redeeming scenes in the third act that people would appreciate.
Sure.
Especially people with nostalgia to the movies.
Yeah,
I believe.
And that's a big thing. What about you, Brendan?
The third act gave me everything I wanted as a Jurassic Park fan. I'm serious. I'm dead serious. Yeah. Well, I will say one thing that didn't quite work, which is like the first, like prior to the third, like the real climax happening, because I mentioned, and I guess we're getting kind of into spoilers a little bit here, so if you haven't seen the film, just slightly
we're going to talk some spoilers here as far as the final sequences, and everyone I think has seen it by now, so feel free to go for it.
Okay, because one thing I do want to talk about, because one thing most people were really sore about were the fact that the raptors appeared to be trained in this movie, which I know because people like their scary raptors, and they were the most frightening thing arguably in the first movie. So when we found out that they weren't going to be wild raptors in this, people were a little bit distraught. But there's a moment where you find out that the Indominus Rex, which I will agree with Matt, I do think that is a pretty scary creature here. I think it's a neat. I really like this dinosaur. I was intimidated by it on screen. And they gave it personality, which I like, and that's what I love about this movie too. Is like what Spielberg did with the first film. He gave the dinosaurs personalities, which I thought was a right thing for Colin Trevorrow to do. That I thought the second and third films are kind of lacking. But there's a moment when you find out that the Indominus Rex is part raptor and it communicates with the other raptors, and then the raptors turn on them. I hated that. Hated that because it simply just felt like we got to shoehorn the wild raptors here because we know the fans want it.
Yeah.
I hated that. Okay, but that's one thing I didn't like. So just bouncing off of that and then going to the final fight in this movie with the T-Rex, which is the same T-Rex from the first film, which most people I think missed. I only knew that because I read the trivia. I didn't even realize it first when I was watching it. But it gave me everything I wanted as a fan. And it even had some moments of heart that I thought were pretty well earned. It actually, kind of like with a movie like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, the non-human characters were the most interesting aspect of this movie. And I thought the climax and the final fight really sealed the deal for that. It gave me what I wanted. So I was smiling like a dork the whole time. Let's just say that.
Yeah, and this is where I will agree with you, Brandon. The third act of this movie gave me everything that I wanted, and even when those flying dinosaurs, I'm not sure what they are, when they came in and they created chaos or whatever, like all that was great. And then we get into the raptors and what they're doing. I loved all of that. As much as I've complained about the performances and some of the scripting issue that I didn't like, this certainly made up for it in huge ways. And like you, Brendan, I was a pretty big fan of the raptor training with the Owen character. Chris Pratt sells it really well. I liked that it was a little different. It was fresh, and it plays on those ideas of that we know of in real life where they can train wild animals nowadays. Right. So it kind of makes a lot of sense. And as an animal lover, I kind of liked that idea. But at the same time, and Chris Pratt's character even mentions this in the film, that they're not 100% trained. They're still wild creatures and can go crazy at any moment. In fact, when Chris Pratt's character has to save a guy from the raptor pit, he was almost eaten himself. So it's even though he's got him trained, it's only to a certain degree. And when we get to that moment that we've seen in the trailers 100 times where he's riding out with the raptors, I found that badass. That was just pure adrenaline excitement. I loved it. Now I agree. I do agree with you, Brendan, that the twist with the Indominus Rex dinosaur, that felt unnecessary to me too, especially because the raptors kept switching sides. It's not like they were just full on raptor at that point. If they would have committed to that, I would have been okay with it, but then they go back and forth, and it forces different themes and ideas into the film that I want to get into in my final thoughts. But I felt like all of that didn't need to be there. But the action is fun once the T-Rex gets involved, like you're saying, Matt, and that big fight happens. It's Trevorrow preying on our nostalgia in all the best possible ways. The action is fun. It's great. I love when he bursts out and destroys that Spinosaurus statue or whatever that was. That was a nice directing touch. Yeah, that was absolutely great. It was well choreographed, and I like how Trevorrow takes us as far as we can with the T-Rex character too, as what's going to happen with him. And he plays on our expectations. And in the end, and the way it plays out, we also see how much respect and love he has for the T-Rex character, which I thought was great. So I thought the ending of all that was phenomenal. Like you were saying, Brennan, it gave me everything I wanted. I was grinning ear to ear. It was amazing. So it's like, just don't think about it. You're going to have fun with this movie. Just don't care about the performances and you'll be fine. So, all right. Well, I have some more final thoughts, but we're running out of time. So I'll toss it to you first, Matt. Any other final thoughts, and what grade would you give Jurassic World?
You should definitely go see this movie if you're looking for a fun summer film. I mean, even not in the summer, I would go re-see this movie several times personally. This is, I don't know if it's just the kid in me or the nostalgia, but I love this movie. But I would definitely give it A-. You know, it's a great movie, and I would recommend anybody to go see it.
Okay. What about you, Brendan?
So I will agree that I could definitely sit down and rewatch this movie. I think of the 4 Jurassic Park films, this may be the most, I guess, quote-unquote, rewatchable and enjoyable one, but I don't think that it's the best movie, obviously, in the saga, but I think it's definitely the most playful, and I think it was going for that, and I think it overall succeeds. But I think there are other things here, aside from just the nostalgia, that do make this movie a good summer blockbuster. I mean, I did like most of the characters. There are some that didn't work. I think the one I really didn't like was shoehorning in Dr. Henry Wu back in, played by B.D. Wong. I couldn't stand him in this movie because it just made no sense.
Especially when you find out the twist of the character, it kind of hurts it even further. Yeah.
I don't know.
I hated that, which I thought that was unnecessary, but I couldn't stand it. But I did like enough of the other characters to be engulfed in this. Actually, the one character we didn't mention was the character of Maserati, played by Iraf Khan, who I had a joy watching him. I liked him too.
He was good. Yeah.
I think, without spoiling too much, I think the resolution of that character was very unsatisfying, because I thought there was more. I wanted to see more that they could have potentially do there. But I think he was one of the better characters in this movie as well. No mention to him, so I want to just give a shout out there. Before I get more into my final thoughts, I wanted to throw 2 other things that I didn't like about this film. One of the attractions was this gyrosphere that allows them to control the sphere around and get up and close and personal with the dinosaurs.
Yeah.
That is the stupidest effing thing I think I've ever seen. That is so unsafe, no matter how indestructible you make this. So unsafe. Hated that thing. And on top of that, it gives you control of this thing, and you can allow 2 young kids in there. Are you stupid? I mean,
well, to be fair though, they were in an enclosed, safe area, so it's not like they were running around with these menacing dinosaurs that could kill them. When that started to happen, they went outside the safe zone. So if anything, you got to blame the kids on that.
I do agree.
Any safe or nice dinosaur could potentially destroy that thing. I mean, you hit that thing and they spin out of control. That's dangerous. I mean, that is dangerous regardless, I think. And I think is a terrible idea, which I heard was actually Spielberg's idea to put that in the movie. So shame on you, Spielberg.
I didn't mind it, Matt. I know you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do agree with Brandon, actually. There is a safe zone, yes, and there are all, nice, gentle dinosaurs in there. But, what if something goes wrong? Who's keeping them?
What's any different between that and the Jeeps they were going to use for Jurassic Park?
Well, who's keeping those kids from coming back to the zone? They can just roam around out there all day, and, if something gets loose,
and there was an electric fence blocking between the Jeep and the actual dinosaurs, and obviously it all went wrong, but they at least had some perimeter set up to separate them from being that up close and personal.
But in all fairness, if they had that there, I would ride it. I mean, I would ride it still.
I would. And I think it gave, for me anyway, the best scene with the kids with the Indominus Rex. Yes. From a filmmaking standpoint, that was one of the best moments with them.
Yeah, I like that as well, but I didn't like the gyrosphere idea as an attraction. I didn't buy that. The other thing I really didn't like, and I'm going to be harsh when I say this too, but I think this film has some, for as far as big summer movies go, and especially action films, I think this movie has some of the worst special effects I've ever seen. I think the CGI in this film is just horrendous. And I think it mostly not has to do with the CGI itself. I think it has to do with the fact that the movie is so glossy, it looks so polished, that even stuff that looked animatronic looked like it was done on computer. It just, something about the look of this film just all looks so artificial, and it was very distracting for me. And I'm not saying that as a biasness to the first film, because there was a lot of animatronics used that created this real visceral look to the special effects. I just didn't like the CGI in this film. I thought it was downright awful. So I hated that as well. But those are my rants, because I also ranted about the character of Hoskins played by Vincent D'Onofrio, which I hated as well. But the other stuff I really liked here, other thing I want to mention is Michael Giacchino's score. I think if you just listen to his original themes, like that couple alongside the reoccurring John Williams themes, I think this is one of Giacchino's best scores. I love his original theme here, and I think it is beautiful, and it totally sells the fact that this is in this tradition of classic summer blockbuster filmmaking of the 70s and 80s that won my heart over. I loved it, and I absolutely loved it, but I did like this movie. Overall, my heart is telling me I want to give this like an A-, but my brain is telling me I want to give it like a B. So I'm gonna just settle in the middle of that and give this a B+. I could easily rewatch this film, and I'm finally happy to say that there's an enjoyable sequel among the Jurassic Park franchise.
Oh yeah.
As far as final thoughts for me, one of the first things I want to say, bouncing off what you were saying, Brendan, about Irfan Khan in this movie, I liked him as well. I thought he was so nonchalant in his performance, and he was just kind of happy-go-lucky, which I kind of liked, and I bought into that character as well, and he has a really great scene with BD Wong that I especially like, and unlike you, I did like the crystallization of his character because it raised the stakes for me. They killed a character that I really enjoyed. And of course, they're not going to kill the kid characters. They're not going to kill Chris Pratt. They're not going to kill Bryce Dallas Howard. So you kill the next best thing. And for me, that absolutely works. So, and I liked him, and I liked the other supporting performances like Jake Johnson. I liked Omar Sy as well, and his little limited screen time works for me. As much as I didn't like the main performances outside of Chris Pratt, those smaller ones certainly worked for me. And the other big thing I want to say as far as my final thoughts, there's a lot of debate, especially on Twitter, over is the film mean-spirited, and I do want to take a few minutes to touch on this because, like I've said before, I am an animal guy, and I feel like in this movie they do want us to feel bad for the dinosaurs, and I do. I love non-human characters. But the other thing about this is, what about the humans? There's a scene in this movie after the turn with the raptors where he's eating a human soldier. And I kind of feel bad for the raptor because he doesn't have a moral compass. It's just instinctual to him. And like Brennan was saying, because of the turn with the Indominus Rex, he now has a new alpha. You could just say he was listening to his new alpha. So I empathize with that. And I especially empathize with him because they take a moment to pause, where the raptor looks up at Chris Pratt, and they have a great connection between the two of them. It was one of my favorite things of the movie. And then the crystallization of that scene is pretty sad. And it's kind of heartbreaking if you feel for the raptors. However, that being said, he's also eating a human being. But they don't stop to make us empathize for the human characters. And the same goes for another human character that I won't reveal to avoid spoilers, I guess, but one of them ends up in this tank with the big fish-eating dinosaur, and that is
Dilophosaurus, I think it is.
Okay, yeah. And it is entirely played for entertainment. It's way over the top. It's extended. It's very long, and you could argue it's pretty undeserving. And that to me was a little distracting. I don't think we necessarily had to see that because there was a lot of other stuff going on in that scene that was chaotic. A lot of other civilians were dying. They didn't necessarily have to go so over the top with that, especially because they're not doing a very good job of making us empathize with the human characters. And I say that to say that if you look at that in contrast to something like the lawyer in the first Jurassic Park and how his death is played, and I think that's the difference between this and a really great film like the first Jurassic Park, is that scene with the T-Rex where the lawyer goes into the bathroom and he dies. The lawyer's death there, I think, adds tension to that scene. It adds to the horrifying nature of what's going on in that, where the tank death in this felt so empty, and it was only played for entertainment value. And I think that's the distinguishing factor between Jurassic World, which is just going to be summer popcorn fun, and Jurassic Park, which will stand the test of time as a classic and great movie. And I didn't necessarily care overall for that. In general, though, Chris Pratt and the dinosaurs in the third act certainly make up for it. And Jake Johnson. I could have used more Jake Johnson. Was pretty...
Let's hope he's in the fifth movie.
Let's hope so. I read something that he was talking sequels. I haven't read into any of that yet, but Anyway, I did enjoy this as well, at least from a nostalgia standpoint. And I think that's maybe where I differ from you guys a little bit. I think outside of the nostalgic aspect, there's so many problems with this film that I don't think I'd like it. But the nostalgia adds it for me. And because of that, I would probably give it a B. I think on its own, just looking at it objectively as a piece of art, I would probably give it like a C-. I think it's kind of a bad movie outside of the nostalgia. But God damn you, Trevorrow, you nailed it. And I ate it. I ate it all up. And like you, Brennan, the score, Giacchino is amazing. It is so good. So anyway, all that being said, we talked a lot about Jurassic World. If you want to read more of our thoughts, you can go check out our Letterboxd page at letterboxd.com/InSessionFilm.
And if you agree or disagree with our takes on Jurassic World, let us know by leaving a comment on our Facebook page at facebook.com/InSessionFilm, or you could tweet us at InSessionFilm, and you can also leave us a comment on our Google Plus page or email us at InSessionFilm@gmail.com.
All right, the InSession Film Top 3 is next, and we're going to be discussing our top 3 moments from the Jurassic Park franchise.
Hold on to your butts.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. The InSession Film Top 3 is brought to you by the guys at the First Time Watchers podcast. And Brendan, we just got done talking about Jurassic World. And, just like that movie, the First Time Watchers podcast is a roaring good time.
I hope you weren't going to say like they're old as fossils or anything.
No, that could be true, but I went with roaring instead.
I like that, and I think Tim would like that too.
I think so too.
But anyway, you're absolutely right. They're a great supporter of our show, and they're definitely a podcast. Everyone out there, check them out. As I mentioned, Tim, but also hosted with him with Walter and Hermano, and they have a roaring knowledge of their movies knowledge. I'd say that.
Absolutely. Their banter is amazing. It's a very entertaining show, just like that last final fight sequence in Jurassic World. It is pure adrenaline. It's awesome.
I'd say that about the whole film, but that's just me. But anyway, what's unique about them is that every week they'll pick out a movie that they've never seen before, which that's the key thing there. They'll watch it and discuss it on their show and create this fresh perspective on the movie. They'll also discuss other movies that they've seen and other trailers that they've seen recently, so it's a really great time.
Absolutely, and they give some movie recommendations at the end of the show that I would also pay attention to. And overall, the show is just very smart. It's fluid. It's so easy to listen to, and they have a lot of fun on their show. You can just tell with the chemistry they have between each other. It's really great. So all that being said, Brendan, where can you find these guys on the internet?
You have to take a boat to the coast of Costa Rica, and it's on Isla Nublar. Not Isla Sorna. That's where True Bromance is.
not that one. You want to stay away from there. When you get to the right place, make a right on Elm Street, and then take a left, and you're going to find them there.
There you go. No, but all serious, there are a couple ways you can find them. You can check them out at firsttimewatchers.blogspot.com, and also hit them up on Twitter at firsttimewatchers, and on Facebook. Just search for First Time Watchers.
Yeah, and subscribe to them on iTunes, and while you're there, leave them a review and let them know that we sent you to them. I promise it's absolutely worth your time, much like a lot of Jurassic World. Go check them out. That's First Time Watchers.
You're listening to the InSession Film Podcast. This is episode 121. Now we're going to be going over our top 3 moments from the Jurassic Park franchise. JD and Matt, did you guys have any criteria that you used to pick your list? We'll start with you, Matt.
I didn't go based off any kind of criteria. I just picked my top 3 favorite scenes. I did kind of lean more towards the suspenseful scenes for me. Those really are more memorable to me. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us are going to be in that same boat as well, Matt. How about you, JD?
The only criteria that I had was that I limited it to one scene per movie. I could have done if I was looking at it from a true list perspective, they would all be from the first movie. But I don't want to do that. And we got a lot of response like that on Twitter, and I don't blame anyone that is doing it. But just to kind of keep it fresh, I only picked one scene from the first movie. And the other thing with that too is that I am not including the famous T-Rex scene that I was alluding to in the review when the T-Rex is attacking the kids in the Jeep. That is a very easy number one. If that's not anyone's number one on a true list, then you're crazy. Although there's a lot of great ones from the first one. I'm not going to include that, though, because it would have been too easy. So that one is left off the list. But that's pretty much where I'm sitting with my criteria.
Well, I guess I'm crazy then, because if this were a true list, it wouldn't make my top 3.
I think you are crazy then.
Yeah. I think there are some moments that I kind of prefer over that one, but I'm kind of in the same boat with you as far as trying to limit this from not doing 3 moments from the first movie. But there was one moment that I will give mention to that I will put within my top 3 that does happen later on in the franchise. So then I'll have 2 moments from the first movie instead. So I'm okay with doing that. So, but I will be going that route, similar to what you're doing, JD. But I want to keep it diverse enough. And I'm going to be avoiding the second and third film naturally, just because there's really nothing that sticks out for me, unfortunately. So, but with that said, Matt, we'll toss to you first. What is your number 3?
My number 3 is actually from Jurassic World. It's the final fight sequence, the final fight scene between the dinosaurs. That was actually my number 3. I really enjoyed it. I was sitting on the edge of my seat. I was wanting to punch the air and, you know what I mean? Fight with them. I was like, this is awesome. Sure. So that's definitely my number 3. I loved that scene.
Yeah, it's a good choice. I quite like it as well.
Yeah, and I'm just going to kind of jump ahead of you there, JD, because that was my number 3 as well. And one of my reasons for putting that as my number 3 is because it kind of encapsulates everything that I love about this franchise into that one scene. It includes, 2 of arguably the best frightening dinosaurs of this franchise with the T-Rex and the Raptor there together. I love that. And it also helps kind of mitigate some of the other scenes I had to leave off this list because of, space requirements, only putting 3, and then you got 20 moments within the first movie alone that you could talk about. So it's basically a greatest hits scene for me, if you want to think of it that way. But it's a total geekdom scene. I love it for that reason, and we talked about it enough already. I don't need to go more into it, but I love this scene.
For my number 3, I guess to just kind of jump off that is, and I guess to kind of set it up, I'm a little bit different than you, Brennan, in the sense that I agree that Jurassic Park 2 and 3 are not very good movies. I would disagree with you in the sense, though, there are at least 1, maybe 2 scenes from each movie that do stand out pretty well, and I would argue are really great scenes. And I'm actually going to go with one of those for my number 3, and that is the RV scene hanging over the cliff in The Lost World, the second movie directed by Steven Spielberg, arguably one of his worst movies, but I do feel like this scene alone is absolutely terrific. It really stands out in that movie, especially when the T-Rex is pushing the RV over the cliff. It's really intense, really thrilling, and it's what I loved about what Spielberg was doing with the first movie, and we only get in glimpses here, but especially when you add in Ian Malcolm, who is obviously one of the better parts of this franchise, Sarah Harding with Julianne Moore's character, and Vince Vaughn's character of Nick in that RV, I thought was pretty terrifying. And especially if you are afraid of heights or afraid of dinosaurs pushing you over a cliff, it's going to be pretty scary. And while I'm not necessarily afraid of heights, I do think that Spielberg nails that scene, and it is really terrific and easily the best part of that movie. So that scene is my number 3.
That is the only moment from one of those 2 films that would be close to making this list. I do like that scene, and I think that is easily the best part of that film. I think the only reason why I may have potentially left it off is because there is some humor kind of sprinkled in that scene that I did not like, but that's just a minor quibble when you're kind of ranking these things and trying to put them close together. But that is a tense scene. That's the best moment of that film, hands down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Continuing on, Matt, what's your number 2?
My number 2 was actually from the first film. It was the scene where Robert Mulden was in the jungle hunting the raptor, but It turns out he wasn't hunting the raptor. The raptors were hunting him.
Yes.
The moment you see the raptor in the background and him drawing his gun, being very carefully, you're like, he's going to get it. And the moment that other raptor poked its head out of the bushes right next to him, it said, "Clever girl."
Sure.
That's scared. That gave me a little bit of scare, especially how young I was. And then saw it jump on him and maul him. I was pretty terrified of raptors at that point.
Clever girl.
And I can understand, especially after seeing that, and we did get a few responses from people with that scene on Twitter, why people wouldn't like the whole trained aspect in Jurassic World. But at the same time, I think it only makes it more impressive and adds an interesting layer that they are that smart, they are that dangerous, and that you can kind of tame them to a degree. I think it's kind of fascinating. But that is a great scene. I do love it.
Yeah, and it's only ironic that these people complaining about the raptors also complain that the movie is too similar to what that they were expecting, which is like, so how hypocritical is that? I guess. But that is a lovely scene. I think Muldoon is one of the more underrated characters from this whole franchise. I love that guy. I think he's great.
Yeah.
How about you, JD? What's your number 2?
My number 2, you guys already mentioned it. That is the Indominus Rex versus T-Rex fight in Jurassic World. And I love it. I mean, we've talked about it, so I won't spend a whole lot of time here, but just seeing that T-Rex come out, the way that it comes out is great. And the fight sequence itself is really well choreographed. I know we kind of went over it just a little bit in the review, but I love the way that Trevorrow plays on the ups and downs of the fight. And then you add in the human characters there, it adds an intensity that is great. It's what's so great about what Spielberg did with the first one. And it's easily one of the best directed parts of Jurassic World. And didn't have as much problem with the CGI as you did, Brendan. I felt like the CGI in that scene specifically was very good, and I really dug what was happening. And like I said, I loved the way Trevorrow ended the fight, the way it crystallizes. Again, just speaks to the nostalgia and his respect for the franchise, and I think ultimately saves where the movie could have been terrible. That aspect certainly saves the movie to being a really good, fun action summer film.
Love it, love it, love it. But there's no more that can be really said about it. We've already
I think we have.
Piece.
Yes,
it's so good. But for my number 2, I'm going to be going a little bit similar to what you were talking about, Matt, with your scene with Muldoon and the raptor poking its head up. But I'm going to go a few minutes before that, and that's the raptor chase in the electrical basement against Ellie. And it's mostly specifically the moment where you've got that happy music, and you've got the camera zooming in on her. She says, "Mr. Hammond, I think we're back in business."
Yeah,
and then the raptor jumps out behind her over her shoulder. In my opinion, that is the single greatest jump scare in motion picture history because you don't expect it at all. And just that jump scare alone is my number 2.
Mr. Hammond, I think we're back in business. Arnold.
And that is one of the best introductions to any monster in any monster movie, period. I think when I first saw it, when I first remember seeing it, it may have been when I was in the drive-in at 4 years old when I should not have been there.
Sure.
Or afterward, I think I fell out of my chair. It is so good, so good. Pitch perfect jump scares, and I hate jump scares because I think they're cheap.
Yeah.
That one works. And I have to give credit for just one second of a moment for my number 2. It's so good.
Fair enough.
So good.
I never really put much thought into it. I'll have to, next time I rewatch it, kind of pay attention to that scene and look to see how it's put together. I do remember the scene itself. I do remember it being pretty visceral, and I do like it, but that is a really interesting choice.
Yeah, I love that moment. But let's get to the nitty-gritty now. Matt, what is your number 1?
My number 1 is again from the first film. And, I guess it is to be expected. A lot of people are going to have number ones in the first film. It is a really good
It's
film.
hard to not pick them for the first
I know.
movie.
Jurassic World was my second favorite, movie that was made. But again, number one was from first film. It was the very beginning, actually, where they're all bringing in the raptors. You don't actually see the raptor, but you see how much caution they are taking moving this animal, and all you can see is its eye. You don't know what it looks like. You have no clue. So it really plays off of your imagination, and you get to see what it actually does to the man. It grabs him, yanks him in, and tears him apart. Everybody's screaming. There's chaos. And I remember I couldn't have been much more older than you. I probably was a little bit older, but that terrified me. And like I said, that changed my views on dinosaurs. It really did. It scared me. Yeah. It was a good scene though. That's my number one.
It's the Jaws effect. It really is.
It absolutely is.
Yeah, but that's I think that's one that's going to go under the radar. But that is a great scene. I love
it. It sets the tone immediately, right? Like
it really does.
It's really fantastic.
Does. Yeah, it totally. Yeah, I completely agree. Absolutely love it. So, how about you, JD? What's your number one?
Well, given my criteria, it was pretty difficult because now I'm having to pick one scene out of the first Jurassic Park. And unlike Crazy Brendan, I think that the T-Rex scene is just one of the best scenes of all time, let alone this genre. But outside of that, given that I'm scrapping that altogether, I think my next pick, though, given how difficult this could have been, was actually quite easy. And given that I'm a score guy, maybe this is going to make a whole lot of sense. But my number one is from the first Jurassic Park, where John Williams' score is coming in and it's ramping up and it climaxes and the camera pans out and we see these huge dinosaurs for the very first time.
How fast are they? Well, we clocked the T-Rex to 32 miles an hour.
T-Rex?
Mm-hmm.
You said you've got a T-Rex?
Uh-huh. Say again. We have a T-Rex. Wow.
Put your head between your knees.
Dr. Grant. My dear Dr. Sattler. Welcome to Jurassic Park.
And given the kind of CGI that was in that film, it was the first time we had ever seen anything like this. The looks on everyone's faces says it all. And I think that was pretty much everyone's faces, jaw dropped, even in the theater. Like, dinosaurs are back to life in the most visceral, awesome way humanly possible. And when you underlie that with the amazing John Williams score in these movies, it was utter beauty. It was poetry in motion, and I loved it. So that is my number one.
They're moving in herds. They do move in herds.
They do move in herds, absolutely.
Welcome to Jurassic. And then that's when he says a great line. Welcome to Jurassic Park.
Absolutely.
I know I'm just kind of spitballing. I mean, that is my number one as well. I'm just going to kind of, just say it right now. That is also my number one for all the same reasons that you were just talking about, JD. So I won't reiterate them here. But that is, I think, the single greatest moment of this entire franchise because it's thrilling, but it's also moving. And it's classic Spielberg be able to combine that kind of juxtaposition of tones together and make it seamless. And it's great filmmaking.
It is.
And when you even watch, I bought the Blu-ray collection. I don't even know why I bought the collection because it has the second and third movie in there. I probably shouldn't have done that. But even when you watch it on Blu-ray today, I mean, yeah, some of the special effects, even in that scene, don't hold up quite as well. They're still better than a lot of other stuff that are coming out this year. They put so much well thought into the craft of that, and it's very poignant.
Yeah.
Love it, love it, love it, love it. But that's our opinions. But anyway, we've got some honorable mentions I'm sure we want to talk about quickly. So, Matt, I'll toss to you. Did you have any honorable mentions that didn't quite make your list you wanted to toss out quickly?
Honorable mentions, the scene, it was in Jurassic World, the scene where Chris Pratt's character came across the dinosaurs that were dead in the field.
Yeah.
And that had been killed by the Indominus Rex. That was actually an honorable mention for me. It was really moving, and you got to see more of a... I don't know. It was sad to see those dinosaurs like that suffering. It hit me. hit me real hard.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a great scene as well. How about you, JD? Any honorable mentions?
Yeah, I just wrote down a few because I don't want to be here all day, and we could be. And you guys mentioned most of them. The clever girl line, that scene I also had as an honorable mention. The raptors in the kitchen chasing the kids, as I alluded to earlier, is one of my favorite moments, and that probably would have been my number 2 given my criteria. But of course, I only wanted one scene per movie, so I left that as an honorable mention. And then my scene from Jurassic World, outside of the big fight scene at the end, although I do love that scene you're talking about too, Matt, only because of Chris Pratt, though. But I really love when Chris Pratt rides out with the Raptors. I thought was awesome. That lived up on every level for me. That was very. It was very close to me saying that one instead of the fight. But I was like, no, the fight it's the perfect climax for Jurassic World. So I couldn't put this one in over that, but I loved it. I was geeking out the whole time, and like the kid said, I thought it was a badass too. So I loved it. It was such a cool moment.
Yep, completely agree. And then, yeah, for any honorable mentions that I had, I mean, you guys mentioned them already. The only one that I'll mention that wasn't talked about yet was a scene from the first movie that didn't have any dinosaurs in it, and it was the ice cream scene between John Hammond and Ellie, where they're just talking.
Yeah.
And they're basically talking about the aftermath of what had just happened as this power has gotten loose. And it goes to the morality of what this whole franchise is about. And you got John Hammond talking about his backstory, about how he got into the flea circus business after he left Scotland. Like, that is a very moving moment and a very thrilling movie. I love that, and I think that's one that kind of goes under the radar. It's a very, very well put together scene, very well written, and I think the screenplay there is top notch. But that's the only one that I have here that hasn't already been mentioned yet, because we can talk about this all night.
All day, yeah.
But there's no point in doing that anyway. But that's what we got.
All right, well, let us know how your picks stack up against ours. Again, you can email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com or leave a comment on Facebook or Twitter, or on our site at InSessionFilm.com. All right, and real fast before we get to our poll, we did throw the question out there on social media as far as your guys' favorite moments from Jurassic Park, and I just want to read a few real fast. But we got a tweet from Chris Murphy who said, the first fence break T-Rex introduction set piece from Jurassic Park is perfection, which I completely agree with. And he also added in the T-Rex and Indominus Rex fight scene from Jurassic World. We also got a tweet from @Lee_Nostramo who said the T-Rex breaking loose, the debate over chili and sea bass, and the van hanging over the edge in Lost World. So another one there to help me out. We got a tweet from @TheVideoVaultUK who said raptors in the kitchen, also a great scene. We got a good tweet from our good friend Dalton Brown who said the dinosaurs, which I also agree with. And finally, we got a tweet from @PC Case Study, our good friend Dave from Pop Culture Case Study, who gave us his 3, the Malcolm could versus should speech, the raptors in the kitchen, and the T-Rex reveal in the first one. And he also threw in an honorable mention of the first sighting, welcome to Jurassic Park, which is another great one. So, and we had a couple of other great comments on Twitter and Facebook as well. We really do appreciate everyone that got back to us on that.
All right, before we move on, let's talk about this week's poll.
It's real bad, okay? I don't like those numbers at all.
Just one poll? Those things aren't scientific.
Yes, they are. All this is science. This is math.
All right, so for this week's poll, we simply asked, who is your favorite character from the Jurassic Park franchise? And we listed Alan Grant, Ellie Sattler, John Hammond, Robert Muldoon, Ian Malcolm, Sarah Harding, Nick Van Owen, or we had a write-in option that just please don't say the Kirbys, or you could say you like the dinosaurs. We also had that as well. And, you know, JD, we probably should have gone with our gut and decided to not even include Ian Malcolm in this list, because it would have been way too damn easy, because he wins with probably the biggest win in our poll history.
Well, actually, last week on the show, Almost Famous won with 52% of the vote. So just...
Was it 52?
Yeah.
I must have missed that point. I didn't even listen to our own show enough.
Yep, thanks for listening. So it was just under it, but it was very close.
Man, but it's at 50%. So yeah, you're right, just under it. But anyway, what's more important, at second place was kind of a surprise, but a very welcoming surprise if you ask me. Robert Muldoon at 18.8%.
I know.
Way to go, all you clever girls out there voting for him.
Know, right?
We also had at third place, I don't care about the humans, I just like the dinosaurs at 12.5%. But then we also had a lot of write-in options for Kill Me Right Now. I should have included this character for Mr. DNA.
A lot of write-ins for that.
Oh my God, Mr. DNA, who makes a cameo in
He does
Jurassic
make
World.
a cameo.
You guys notice that?
Yes.
I love that. Yeah. Oh, I can't believe I forgot about that mofo.
Yeah, he does make a little cameo, and we had a ton of comments. Maybe more comments for that character than actual votes on the website for Ian Malcolm. So we can consider that the actual winner if we want.
We can, just because Ian Malcolm's too easy.
Yeah, that's true. So, but a lot of votes either way, and we really do appreciate everyone that voted this week. All right, stay tuned. Coming up next, we are going to finish out our Pixar movie series with a fun discussion on Finding Nemo.
Fish are friends, not food.
Exactly. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hey guys, just want to pause for a quick second to say a huge thank you to everyone that is supporting the show. If you want to help support us, there's a couple ways you can help us out. One, if you just want to listen to some fun bonus content that we do every couple weeks, you can do that on our site. And it is free to listen to, actually, but we do encourage and appreciate a small donation of 99 cents since we do run it on an honor system. And we have some awesome bonus content up there that we think that you're going to enjoy, including some fun stuff with Mark Kearney and DJ Valentine. Definitely go and check that out. You can also check us out at patreon.com. At patreon.com, you can support us while donating per show and earning some awesome gifts at the same time. We have a couple different levels, and the higher the level you give, the more gifts you're going to get in the process. Just go to patreon.com/InSessionFilm, and you're going to see a whole bunch of information there and how you can support us there on Patreon. You can also just donate directly to the show via PayPal, whether it's a one-time donation or a monthly subscription. We have a whole bunch of information at InSessionFilm.com/donate, and you're going to see that PayPal button right there. And no matter what you do, we really do appreciate it.
Yeah, we absolutely appreciate it. Thanks, guys, who have been supporting. And kind of going off of what you said, JD, about Patreon, who doesn't like being able to get free stuff for supporting someone? And on that note, as I mentioned at the beginning of this show, we do have something called the InSession Film Store, where you can buy some awesome merchandise with our logo on it. I won't go into everything that we have because I've already done that, but I will say we should probably start looking to getting some Jurassic Park merchandise to put our logo on.
Yeah,
I think
that'd be fun. If we can do that, yeah.
Let's work out a deal with Universal Studios and get some Raptor toys that says
heck yeah.
InSession Film reviewed me or something like that.
Exactly.
But anyway, that's another great way for you guys to support us. There's some great collateral there, and like I mentioned, we'll also customize something for you. If you have an idea of something that we don't have there, we'll get something customized for you with our logo on it, but we'd appreciate some feedback there as well. And also, as we've mentioned before in other shows, we are sponsored by Audible.com. If you go to audibletrial.com/InSessionFilm, you can get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial. There's over 150,000 titles for you to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or any other smart device that you have. I believe that they may have some Jurassic Park collateral on there. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm sure you can find something. I'm sure you can find material related to that, and while at the same time you go in there, you'd be supporting us at the same time. There's a lot of great collateral for you to choose from there that's very entertaining, and I highly, highly recommend it, especially if you're Star Wars fans.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good Star Wars collateral there.
Absolutely. So no matter what you do, even just a subscription to iTunes or like on Facebook or Twitter, it goes a long way. We really do appreciate everyone's support.
Hi, this is Greg.
This is Chuck.
And this is Dan. And we are Talking in Circles. Because the world needs another podcast, we are here as Geekcast Radio's newest edition.
And as the title says, each week we get lost in conversation about a wide range of topics, including movies, comics, games, art, TV, and even occasionally sports.
We play games and discuss pivotal topics like who would win in a fight, the Kool-Aid Man or Tony the Tiger, and examine the hot-button issues of the world of geekdom. We keep things fresh by taking timeless topics in new directions.
We are simply three friends having a fun time talking about life's most fascinating foibles.
Stay connected with us every Tuesday on iTunes or at geekcastradio.com.
You're listening to the InSession Film Podcast. This is episode 121. Hey there, Mr. Grumpy Gills. When life gets you down, you know what you need to do?
Just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming.
Wake up! Come on, where's this school?
I don't want to go to school. 5 more minutes.
Not you, Dad, me.
Okay.
Get up. Time for school, time for school.
All right, I'm up. It's time for school.
Whoa!
Nemo!
Where's this school?
Nemo, don't move. Don't move. You'll never get out of there yourself. I'll do it. All right, where's the brake? You feel a brake?
No.
Sometimes you can't tell because fluid is rushing into the area. Now, any rushing fluids?
No.
Are you woozy?
No.
How many stripes do I have?
I'm fine.
Answer the stripe question.
3.
No! See, something's wrong with you. I have 1, 2, 3. That's all I have? Oh, you're okay. How's the lucky fin?
Lucky.
Let's see. Are you sure you want to go to school this year? Because there's no problem if you don't. You can wait 5 or 6 years.
Come on, Dad. It's time for school.
Forgot to brush.
Oh.
Do you want this anemone to sting you?
Yes.
Brush.
Okay, I'm done.
Up, you missed a spot.
Where?
There.
All right, well, before we get into our discussion of Finding Nemo, as we've been doing in this series, we are going to be hearing from Josh Larson from Larson on Film and Film Spotting. Before we get into it, fellas, let's listen to Josh's thoughts on Finding Nemo.
I'm so glad you guys included Finding Nemo in this series because as of right now, it stands as my favorite Pixar film. That's a list that's constantly in flux, but hey, that's where it is right now. I've long made the case that Pixar's best movies are those that are made for parents first and then their kids, and I think this is the most explicit case of that. It's really a parable for parents who are terrified at the thought of sending their child to preschool. Of course, it's also hilarious. Ellen DeGeneres, she gives one of my favorite Pixar vocal performances, and the undersea animation is just luscious. There's depth to it, a color, a sense of the sea as an endless space. You could argue that Pixar films get more sophisticated in their ideas as the studio would move on from here, but for the true Pixar blueprint, look no further than Finding Nemo.
All right, thanks, Josh, for those comments. Some really great stuff there that we will definitely talk about here in a second. So, all right, let's get into it, guys. Finding Nemo is directed by Andrew Stanton and stars Albert Brooks, Ellen DeGeneres, Alexander Gould, and a few other people as well. All right, Matt, we'll start with you, man. What did you think about Pixar's Finding Nemo?
It has been a long time since I had seen that movie, and I really enjoyed it. Like, it's a really great Pixar film. It's one of those ones that you could probably rewatch several times. And much as it seems like most of the time I'd either catch it on TV. I remember seeing it on DVD, but the very beginning part of the movie, I didn't even remember that. And I had been seeing it for years, and I finally realized, okay, this is why he's so protective of his son. And I just, I was like, how could I miss that? You know, I forgot completely about it. And it's like depressing.
It is.
It's a heart it's a deep scene, and you're like, wow, that kind of sets the tone for the rest of the movie of like why he's fighting so hard for his son.
Sure.
But it's a great movie. I really enjoyed myself.
All right. What about you, Brendan?
Yeah, I would say this is definitely one of the more rewatchable films among Pixar's filmography. I adore this film, and I was so happy to just to sit down and rewatch it again to notice certain things about it that I didn't pick up on the first time. I will say this. I think this is one of Pixar's funniest films, without a doubt, hands down. And I think it has the funniest moment of any Pixar film in this movie, and that is the seagulls going, mine, mine, Mine?
Yeah.
But then you've got the character of Nigel, the pelican. Like, oh, would you just shut up, you rats with wings? Like, I love that. Like, there's a lot of clever writing in this movie, which I really appreciate. I mean, you've got the character of Dory, who has short-term memory loss, which is totally playing on the myth about goldfish having short-term memories, which I think is very clever. I love the idea that sharks are attending this like intervention of trying not to eat fish. I absolutely adore that. And as Matt, as you were talking about, the first like 5 minutes of this movie, they know how to tug at your heartstrings immediately. And even going off of that a little bit, something that Josh was saying in his clip that he sent us is kind of the idea about this focusing from the parent perspective, which is that is very rare for a kids movie to be from the perspective of the parent, and I think that is very essential to this film's success. Now, granted, I will say this out loud, like having rewatched it again, having rewatched all these Pixar films again, this doesn't quite edge out some of the other ones that we've talked on this series. I do like a lot of the other films that we've talked about on this series better, and I'll get into some of those minor things that did bother me a little bit. Now, when I say bother me, I don't mean that as a criticism. I mean that I have to sit down and nitpick every single goddamn detail to be able to rank these like top tier Pixar films. Sure. But that's just...
Well, as Josh said, even though this is his favorite, that's always teetering, right? It can always go back and forth.
Exactly. But there are some things that happen in Finding Nemo that I'll get to later that I did think weakened it a little bit as far as compared to these other phenomenal films, but they're very minor. Sure. But at the same time, this is an amazing movie. Love it.
Yeah, and I'm with you guys. I really like this film too, and I can understand why people like Josh would have this as their favorite Pixar film. This is also my wife's favorite Pixar film as well. In fact, she was like, you guys can't watch this without me if you're going to watch it this week, so we had to make sure she was here for that. But for me, I'm like you, Brennan. This isn't quite my favorite, but I love it. In fact, it actually wasn't even supposed to be in this series until we put it out to a fan vote, because I would have rather have discussed Up versus Finding Nemo.
Me too.
For me personally.
Me too.
But I like this movie a lot. And that being said, I actually had a little bit of a different experience this time around that actually resonated the film more for me than the first time, in the sense that you're right, Brendan, that this has a parenting perspective on it for sure. But for me this time around, and I had always kind of seen this as a father seeking a son, but almost from the son's perspective, where this time around I looked at it from the opposite view. It was from a father's perspective, going after his son. And of course, my wife's pregnant, so that has a lot to do with it. In fact, that has everything to do with it. But those first 5 minutes, like you're talking about, Matt, destroyed me. And it's actually quite funny because Matt and I watched this earlier together over at our place, and it took everything in me not to just burst out in those moments. Like, I was trying to hold it in as much as I could because it left me floored and it emotionally resonates. And you're right that it kind of has this Bambi-like beginning. Something happens to the mother, but at the same time, it also showcases the true fury and reality of living under the sea. It kind of raised the stakes a little bit. And, you know, as the story becomes this father pursuing his son and trying to save him, it's almost as an allegory for me that I really like. I really enjoyed that idea of a father pursuing their kids at any moment. And of course, from the son's perspective, he is looking for his father as well. And you'll do anything to love them. And I think ultimately that's what it's about. I don't think it's a story about rescue as much as it is a story about a father's love. And especially seeing it from the father's perspective, it just destroyed me this time around. But like Josh said, it also works as a parable for parents who are scared of sending their kids out to preschool or just letting their kids live their own lives or whatever. Like, all that certainly works as well. I mean, there's a lot of humor in this film too, but this specific rewatch for me just resonated even more emotionally. I think I like the film overall even better, if that's even humanly possible. So it's a great film.
Yeah, like you said, the parenting perspective, the father chasing after the son, you know, that's what I saw a lot when I see the movie. Father chasing after his son, he was really concerned. That's his whole goal, is to get to his son. You can tell he really loves him and cares about him, but at the same time, he has to let go. And I think there was a lot of growth in his son through this moment. Where he said, "Yeah, I trust you. I need to let go at some point." When he finally lets go of his fin, saying, "No, you can't do this," and he caught himself saying, "Hey, you can't do this," when they were stuck in the net, and he got in there and actually said, "Yeah, I can, Dad. Just trust me." And him letting go, I think that was a huge moment, and he finally realized, his son's going to grow up, and that was kind of like his son turning into a man. Or a manfish, whatever you want to call it.
Manfish.
A manfish. That was like his point, saying, "Hey, Dad, I can do this." And his dad's like, "Okay, I trust you."
Yeah. And that's a really pivotal moment you're talking about. And what's also interesting about that is it happens after they reunite. So he goes on this huge, long, arduous journey to find his son. And then they reunite. But it's not until after they reunite that there's this incident that happens, and he has to have this cathartic moment of letting his son go. And that, to me, I think just raises the themes of this movie and what's happening between those two characters in a really interesting way that is even kind of fun at the same time.
Right,
and the way he gets the other fishes to work and stuff, it's really interesting. Anything to add to that, Brendan?
Yeah, and I think you guys are absolutely right. And one thing you mentioned, Matt, like kind of going off of what's something that Marlon says to his son about, like, you can't do these things. I think one of the best lines in the movie is when he says, like, I think I don't know if it's verbatim or not, but he says, "You think you could do these things, but you can't, Nemo." But it's when he says it to Dory, and I love
that's when he realizes.
That's the turning point of the entire film for me, when they're both caught in the whale, and he hasn't come to terms with that yet.
And he's literally got to let go himself in that moment.
Exactly,
like literally,
exactly. But I think you guys are absolutely right, but what I also think is very key, and this is something kind of I was going to try and jump in on this when you were talking, JD, about how when you first saw this movie, you saw it from Nemo's perspective. Then, as you recently, you saw it from Marlon's perspective. But I think that's what makes the movie work for both kids and adults, because you've also got Nemo's perspective as a separate storyline with him in the fish tank meeting all these other fish. You got the character played by Willem Dafoe. You got Alice and Janney in there, and all great characters in themselves. I think they add a lot to this film in this really funny dentist office environment that I think was really clever.
Yeah, it's great.
But that is really smart writing, and Pixar is so good at doing that and being able to create a film that is for both kids and adults, but not at the same time. Is that adults enjoy it in one way, kids enjoy it in a totally different way. But it's never a disconnect. It's not where, like, oh, I'm not enjoying this part. Oh, I'm an adult, but I'm enjoying this part now. Yeah. It's able to be seamless, and it's brilliant writing, and that's what makes Pixar so good is their writing, and this is a perfect example of that.
And another great thing about the dentist aspect of this too is there's so many different cameos to their other Pixar films, which is great. Yeah. And I was also reading how they had cameos to characters that hadn't even come out yet, like Lightning McQueen, or there was like some reference to Cars in this movie, and Cars came out like 3 years after the fact or something like that. Yeah. So, and one of the little boys that was in the dentist's office had a comic book for The Incredibles, which came out a year later than this. So, wow. Just really interesting stuff. But even in this film itself, going back to this story, another thing that I like about the kid perspective with Nemo in the tank is there's this element of him having this short fin that is easy, I think, for kids to relate to in terms of having some sort of shortcoming and then overcoming it, which is a nice little thematic touch that Pixar throws in these films. That is, it's not over the top, it's subtle, but it's easy for kids to grasp onto, and it works in this film. I think it just adds another dynamic to it. But the one thing we got to talk about, guys, is we cannot talk about this film and not talk about the animation. The animation is incredibly impressive in this movie. And last week we were talking about Ratatouille and about how for animators, water is just a difficult thing to do a lot of times. But because this takes place under the sea or in a fish tank, they have to get that right. And they do an incredibly impressive job. In fact, I was reading up about this film, and I think this is kind of well known about this movie now, but as they were developing this, the water looked so realistic that they had to make it look fake in order for people to buy into it as an animated movie and not real footage of the ocean. Like, it was that realistic, which is crazy,
man.
Which is crazy. And, you know, there's lots of stuff you can go and read about how the animators got that, and they did a whole bunch of research on it and stuff. But I thought that was really great when you're talking about the light and the coloration in the water or the darkness of the deep ocean. I love that when the ship is like on the edge of that cliff and half of the screen is light in the water, which is already terrifying itself. And then you look further down at the second half of the screen and it is just deep, dark ocean water, which is terrifying to think about going down there. And then, of course, they go down there and you're like, oh my God, like I would just want to kill myself. So, but it's great. Like the coloration and the animation is so vivid, and it creates such a visceral setting that is lush and just incredible. Easily one of the best things about this movie as well.
I really think that this is kind of the turning point for Pixar as far as animation quality. Not to say that their animation beforehand wasn't good. It's just when you watch maybe like a Bug's Life and the first Toy Story, you notice some certain things from a touching up aspect that don't quite hold up when compared to something like The Incredibles or Ratatouille or even WALL-E and Up. That there's a quality of, you can see how the animation improves. But when you compare those films to what happened in Finding Nemo, it's a huge step up. I mean, this really was their turning point to being like this. These guys, just not only story and writing, visually, these guys are doing something out of this world that no one can match. And it's not even just the animation quality; it's the attention for detail. It's the fact, like you're talking about, JD, that it's, you know, on the surface it's a bit brighter, but then it's so dark and depthful underneath that, and that perfectly encapsulates what it's like in the deep blue sea, and because and that's exactly what it's like. But it's
and even the coloration on the fish and the scar on the gill character's the side of his face or whatever, like it's so crisp and sharp. It's just incredible.
Yeah, but even look at, you know, the plant life down there, the coral life.
It's the coral reef is incredible.
It all moves with the tide in certain directions. They get the movements right. They study how this stuff actually works, so it actually feels like it is captured from a realistic way, even though ironically...
The currents with the turtles?
Yeah, even though ironically they have to go back and make it look more animated.
Yeah, I know. Crazy, right?
Yeah, but...
You guys did too good of a job. Stop it.
Yeah. So, I love Pixar. And visually, it's astounding.
Yeah, I agree. I think the thing that I really enjoyed about it is how colorful it was.
Yeah.
You know, like you were talking about the coral reef and stuff. It really makes you feel like you're taking a journey through, you know, the ocean and a coral reef. I mean, that's kind of what they were going for, I'm sure. But you really get to see the detail that they put into the reef and the detail they put into the fish. And I loved the colorfulness of the film. That's what I really enjoyed, was the color.
Yeah, very vibrant colors. It's really great. And because it's, you know, we're in the coral reef, which has a lot of coloration, then there's the blueness of the ocean that stands out really well. And then there's the dentist's office, which has its own coloration, which is really great. And I just love how all of that just elevates this film to a whole new level. But all that being said, guys, let's go to final thoughts. So any other final thoughts, and what grade would you guys give Finding Nemo?
I really enjoyed the film. Great film. Like I said, fun film for parents and kids, because it did have both aspects. It's one of those very easily rewatchable Pixar films.
Yeah,
and definitely one of my favorite. Grade-wise, I would give it an A-.
Okay, what about you, Brendan?
Yeah, I'm in that same boat as well, Matt. I think the one thing is that it is incredibly rewatchable, and as I mentioned earlier, I do think it's one of Pixar's funniest films. I think the gags and the clever writing is just nonstop here, I think more so compared to some of their others. I also think that Thomas Newman's score is just beautiful, and you know, JD, you know us, both of us, we always like to talk about the score in any movie like that. Yeah. It's fantastic. I did mention in the beginning that there were some things that did hold it back from me, that did prevent it from being like like top 3 Pixar instead of like top 6 or something like that for me.
Sure.
And I think we were talking about a bit with the final sequence at the end when it comes to, Marlin having to let his son Nemo help all the school fish that get trapped in the net. There's something about the execution of that it happened after their reuniting rather, that it kind of felt a little tedious for me. And I do think that I feel like that as appropriate as that ending is, I do feel like it kind of starts to drag a little bit. That I don't know. I think it was more of an execution thing. Again, I'm kind of nitpicking here. And the other thing I'll nitpick is that I think one thing this movie could have done is to give us a bit more, I guess, banter, or not really banter, but a relationship established between Marlin and Nemo at his current age of this film, because we really get like what almost
it's
feels
pretty
like
quick, yeah.
Yeah, it's very quick, and then he's captured, and he has to go find him. I feel like it almost could have been like, what if the movie gave us like an Up like sequence of him growing up with his son, and we got to see that relationship develop a little bit. I mean, and that's. I understand Pixar doesn't want to sugarcoat their drama a bit, but I think maybe something like that could have maybe enhanced it a little bit. But that's, again, it's just something maybe that could have been there. The last thing I will say is that we spent this whole review and we didn't even talk about Dory. She's one of the most recognizable characters in the whole Pixar filmography.
Yeah,
and
having her own movie coming out soon.
Exactly, and I was just going to mention that, but Josh Larson said that she's Ellen DeGeneres' vocal performance of her is one of his favorites, and I would have to agree with that as well. I think she's hilarious here, and it's totally Ellen DeGeneres. If you don't even know she's in the movie, the second you hear her voice, it's like, oh, that's Ellen. I love that. I love that. But I think as far as a grade, it's definitely Up. I give this at least an A. It's not quite the range of like WALL-E and Up, where I give like an A++++++, like, to infinity. But it's a lovely film. I adore this film. It's definitely one of Pixar's better efforts, I would say.
Yeah, I still really like this movie as well. And while it's not one of my favorites, I pretty much love everything that's going on here. I think for me, my little nitpicks, if you will, is in some of the humor of the film, like the whole sharks thing. While it is kind of funny that they are trying to live with this moral code, it's just not something that is going to put that over the top for me as far as compared to some of the other stuff happening in the other films. I mean, that is fine, don't get me wrong, or even like the whole irony of him being a clownfish, but yet he can't tell a good joke. That's fine, works in the movie. I just don't find it as compelling as the other stuff happening in The Incredibles or Ratatouille or whatever. So, like I said, it's just minor nitpicky stuff. The one thing I will disagree with you, though, with Brennan, is I love what they do as far as going another step further between Nemo and his dad at the end. I thought all of that was needed. I think it takes it a step further as far as not only the dad having to let go, but he actually has to put it into action, which is two very different things. I can say that I'm going to make a podcast. It's a very different thing to actually podcast and put it up. So I think that them going a step further and showing us that, I think just adds another layer to it. I do agree with you about the beginning, though, Brendan. I think that we could have seen a little bit more there. It certainly works for me, especially, I guess, as I was articulating as far as being a father and just looking at it through those eyes, that it still works for me. Like, I love my son, even though he's not born yet. I still I'm still developing a love there that I cannot wait for. And so I don't need to have things happen for me to establish that relationship. I already love my son. And so looking at it through that lens, it certainly works for me. But like we've been saying, the balance of emotion and humor, it's really well earned here. Like you were saying, Brendan, with Dory, such a great, fun character. Ellen DeGeneres really nails it. It's really great. And then the last thing I'll say is, in just kind of doing some research for this, I found a really fun story where Andrew Stanton, the director here, he pitched his idea to John Lasseter, who was the Pixar head at the time. And in this session, he was using these elaborate visual aids and these different character voices. And at the end of it, Stanton was so exhausted and he asked Lasseter what his thoughts were, and Lasseter just replied, "You had me at fish," which I think is hilarious. So, and I think it turned out really well. So good job, Andrew Stanton.
Also, fun fact is that Andrew Stanton apparently does the voice of Crush.
Yeah. He does, yeah. Which I also read he wasn't supposed to do that originally, but in early test screenings, they loved Stanton's voice, so he just kind of went with it. So,
you so too rock, squirt.
Yeah, that's great. So I would give this a grade of an A. It's still a really good film, still one that has a great rewatchability factor to it. So, and I can't wait to show Sam when he is old enough to watch it. So anyway, if you want to check out more thoughts on this, you can, again, see our Letterboxd page at letterboxd.com/InSessionFilm.
And Finding Nemo is the last film in our Pixar movie series. It's going to be concluding it, which is getting kind of exciting but sad at the same time.
I know. It's been fun.
It'll lead to some big things next week. Be sure of that. Also, you could be sure to check out this whole series on our website at InSessionFilm.com by clicking on Movie Series under the podcast tab on that site. And again, we'd love your feedback. So if you have any feedback on any of these great films and even branching away from the great films that we talked about, let us know by leaving a comment on our Facebook page or Twitter or even on our website right there at InSessionFilm.com.
And the last thing to know is, so next week is Inside Out, which we'll be discussing on the show with Josh, of course, but we're also going to be ranking this series along with Inside Out as well. And so make sure you stay tuned for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right.
Yes.
Well, before we get out of here, Matt, thanks for joining us, man. This was great.
Yeah, it was awesome being back on the show after so long.
So long.
Years.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, guys. It really was fun.
Yeah, this was a ton of fun. Let's not go 119 more episodes before you come back. So
yeah, let's hope not, right?
Yes.
I'll agree with that.
Yeah, this was great. So we'll definitely come back. Before we get into our closing thoughts here, where can people find you online?
Well, I'm not into the whole online thing. I don't have a Twitter, so you really can't find me online. So
there you go. All right. Well, email
Shun the non-believer.
You can only find me sometimes on this show.
There you go. Every 119 episodes. We're going to try to correct that, though.
That's right. Catch me 119 episodes later.
Yeah.
5 years from now.
And the next time he's on the show, I'm going to make sure he has a Twitter account. That's coming from the social media manager. So we're going to correct that.
That's also coming from the same guy that said the same thing to me when I first guested on this podcast back on the Blue Ruin days of the Extra Film segment.
I remember.
And look at me on Twitter now.
Yeah, I know. Active and doing lots of really good stuff. I like it. So we're going to make that
happen.
Trying to. Yeah.
If you guys can get me a Twitter account, then that means Jurassic Park must be real, and I'm going there. So,
all right, we'll make that happen. Anyway, okay, that should do it for this week's show. Just a reminder to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/InSessionFilm and on Twitter at InSessionFilm. You can also find us on Google Plus and YouTube. Just search InSessionFilm and sign up for our monthly newsletter. You can do that on Facebook by clicking the newsletter tab or on our site at InSessionFilm.com/newsletter.
And for more thoughts on the films that we watch, you can check us out on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/infilm, and you can email us at InSessionFilm@gmail.com. We try to respond to every piece of email that we get there. Also, subscribe to us on iTunes and on Stitcher. Also, leave us a comment and review on iTunes while you're there. We'd appreciate some feedback on that medium as well. And lastly, you can check out our Listen Now page, which is on our website at InSessionFilm.com/listen-now.
And the InSession Film Podcast is supported by our super awesome listeners like you. Once again, if you want to help us, just go to InSessionFilm.com, click on that fun bonus content tab in our main menu to hear our bonus content for just a small donation of 99 cents. You can check out the InSession Film store or just go to InSessionFilm.com/donate, and you're going to see a bunch of information there and how you can help us. One thing that I would highly recommend is checking out our mobile app where you can hear everything we do on under one roof for just a one-time fee of $1.99. You can find that app on the Amazon Market for Android devices, the Windows 8 phone store for Windows devices, and the podcast box set for iOS devices. And all those details are on the site at InSessionFilm.com/apps. Brendan, we already mentioned Inside Out next week, but what else are we doing?
So, yes, Inside Out with Josh Larson from Film Spotting and Larson on Film. I am so excited to get that discussion rolling. Yeah. But we'll also be kind of similar to what we did this week. We'll be talking about our top 3 favorite moments/scenes from Pixar films. So looking at all those different moments.
That's going to be impossible.
Yeah. I mean, we could have focused on other things like characters or other things like that, but I feel like most of their movies are defined by specific moments, and I think we need to honor that.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be a lot of fun. For our discussion segment, as you said, we will be doing our ranking of the movie series that we talked about, and kind of talking a little bit more about Pixar with what they have to offer for the future. What are our anticipations of that? Do we see good things? Are we excited for some of these sequels that they announced? I think I think it's going to be kind of a loose discussion. We don't have a huge crutch to kind of hold us together, but I'm excited for that. I think it's going to be a good show.
It's going to be awesome. Yeah, absolutely. So make sure you stay on the lookout for that next week. Before we leave today, Matt, any final thoughts before we get out of here today?
You boys want some popsicles? Got some in my cellar if you boys want some. No, I'm just kidding. Thanks for having me, guys. I had a blast. Yes. I hope to come back sometime.
Big win.
Yes, big win. That was great. So, all right. Any final thoughts for you, Brendan, before we leave?
Other final thoughts from me, though. So, JD, I just want to mention this because we started talking about this briefly, but at some point this summer, we will be doing our top 5 favorite films of the decade so far. And I am very excited to talk about that. I feel like I've already got my 5 picked, and I want to talk about them now, like right now.
We have to wait on that. You got to be patient, but we'll get there. We're gonna get there.
We'll find the right time to talk about it. I just want to let people know, just to get the anticipation rolling, because we had some great films this decade. But we will be revisiting some of those, and we will be talking about them. So stay tuned on that.
Yeah, which I can't wait, because I've been thinking about it a lot too. I know at least 3 of my 5. The other 2 are kind of up in the air. So, I'm going to be curious to hear your thoughts, because I know some over the last 5 that you're very, very passionate about. So, I don't know. I'll be curious to see which ones make the list and which ones don't. It'll be a fun discussion.
You mean like me passionate about in a good way or a bad way?
In a good way.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, it'll be a fun discussion. I can't wait to do it. So, the last thing I want to say, and this is more of a sad final thought than anything, but this next week for our Extra Film Podcast is Matt Oak's last show for him being a co-host on the podcast. And it's going to be sad. I'm still not exactly sure what we're going to do, because he wanted to do something that we're actually going to be doing on our main show here in just a few weeks. So I had to nix that, but we're going to figure something out this week. It's going to be a fun little send-off, and we're in a working transition of finding a new co-host. So we'll see about that, but join us next week for Matt's last Extra Film. It's going to be a sad but positive day, I guess.
No, not positive. That's just sad 100%. He was great. He was great.
He was great, man.
He got these great interviews with folks. Like, geez, remember a review of Ex Machina? We had an interview with Alex Garland on that. That was incredible.
This week we had exclusive InSession Film content from an interview he did with Atticus Ross for Love and Mercy, which we played on the show as well. So, I mean, I'm going to miss him too. He's been great. We've had a lot of comments too, as far as people being upset that he's leaving, and I've tried to poke that fire as much as I can, going, people like you here, you should stay. And if you listen to our Extra Film this last week during our Love and Mercy discussion, I used a lot of my points for that film as points to try to get him to stay as well. I don't think it worked though.
You little tease.
I know. So anyway, join us for that this Friday next week. As Brendan alluded to, we're talking Inside Out. I can't wait. For nothing but great things about it. Look forward to it. Thanks, Matt, for joining us. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you guys next time on the InSession Film Podcast. Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast, Vibecast, where we are going to be vibing this afternoon and a little chill cast as we seducedly discuss Jurassic World. All those sexy Dinobots taking over Jurassic World.
Jurassic Dinobots.
Yeah, baby.
Sexy Dinobots.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about Jurassic World. Dinosaurs, sexy dinosaurs.
Keep talking.
And Herbert the Pervert's going to join us later.
Yes, please.
He's going to join us for to talk less about the dinosaurs and more about the boys that were running for their lives. But
yeah, so how about those boys running for their lives, huh?
Those boys are okay in my book.
Oh, boy. For the entire version of our podcast, be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes or on Stitcher, or check us out online at InSessionFilm.com.